is something that permanently altered your body without you realizing for months years. Story 1, pregnancy. I had twins. I got huge in the tummy. I had the babies, and it left this potbelly that wouldn't go away. Fast forward, the twins are 8 years old. I am 7 weeks post-op of having my diastasis recti corrected. You know that center line down the abs? Mine had split. There was a 6 to 8 inch gap down the middle, the whole way down. The potbelly that I kept punishing myself for, the baby fat I couldn't lose, those were my organs. My digestive organs were all herniated. I now have to forgive myself for 8 years of unjustified self-hatred. It isn't always just fat. Story 2, I was a college athlete. We were told that pain was temporary, but pride was forever. I've had 3 orthopedic surgeries, one of which wasn't successful and from which I went septic. I was diagnosed with arthritis before I was 20. My knees are shot. I have more cracks, pops, and stiffness than people 10 years older than me. As it turns out, the pain is forever and comes with compounding interest. Story 3, working out. I was a skinny, tiny woman, constantly harassed and/or assaulted by men. Not because I was attractive, but because I looked easy to overcome. I got so tired of fighting, screaming, and what happened when I lost, that I got a book by Arnie, a bench, and a simple dumbbell set, and decided I was not going to stop until I weighed 45 kilos, 100 lbs. I only made it 30 years later, when menopause kicked in. But by that time, I was addicted to being fit, strong, and confident. Now I'm 75 and, aside from some arthritis, as physically capable as most people 30 years younger. And I feel great. Story 4, casual drinking. I'm 7 months pregnant, and it's amazing how much weight I've lost and how drastically different my face looks in pictures. I'm not going back to drinking after giving birth. Story 5, dentist had to out a wisdom tooth. The somehow damaged my jaw. The jaw is now permanently pressed upwards and had pushed stuff around so it impacts most of the right side of my face. My jaw now pops on that side. I've lost about 60 of hearing in that ear, and I get massive dizzy spells now. That was 25 years ago. Story 6, a few years of CrossFit have left me with permanent knee and shoulder pain. Heavy weights shouldn't be lifted for time. Your form inevitably goes to, and you set yourself up for joint injuries. Story 7, obstructive sleep apnea. When you already know you have some mental troubles, you think that explain your drowsiness, low mood, and don't look for more issues. It does not only hurt your cardiovascular system, it may slowly destroy your life. If you're overweight or obese, snore at night and/or feel sleepy all day, go see your doctor. Edit added and OR. Because as many of you relevantly said, weight is an important factor but not always necessary. Story 8, being kept 100 out of the sun as a kid. I wasn't given vitamin D supplements either, so my bones are pretty fragile and break easily, and my enamel is delicate and shears off if my teeth close too hard. My body never sequestered calcium properly as a kid, and there's nothing I can do about it as an adult. My mom thought she was protecting me from skin cancer, but she was really dooming me to a life of bone fractures and bad teeth. Story 9, acne. I thought it was something that would go away after your teens, but it's still destroying my face a decade later and nothing seems to work. It's most likely genetic since the other women in my family still suffer from it. Even if there was a cure, I still have the permanent scarring since dark skin tends to scar worse than light skin. I know it seems minor compared to what others said here, but people aren't as kind to those with a messed up face. Story 10, acting like you'll never feel the dumb you did when you were younger. I'm about to turn 30. Years of motocross, motorcycle accidents, lifting improperly, smoking, vaping, welding with limited ventilation, poor diet, moderate alcohol use, etc. I've had so many new pains or issues pop up just this year. I'm legitimately worried I might make it to 60, or if I somehow hold together, I won't hold up mentally and check out. Story 11. My parents had the kids do a lot of manual labor, starting when I was only 5 or 6. Not just helping in the yard, but actual landscaping work. My brother and I once had to haul rocks in those 10 Lubs buckets from a dumpster to the egress windows 300 yards away. Being so little, we had no idea about posture, lifting with your legs, etc. We both have chronic back, shoulder, knee, and neck pain, and have the beginning symptoms of arthritis. We're only 21 and 26 now. Makes me mad that I hurt myself when I was so little, doing work that the adults should have been doing. Story 12, burnout. I was so afraid of losing everything that I stretched myself to my actual collapse. 5 years later, I can still feel the damage my brain sustained from that period of my life, and I still lost everything and had to start over. If I could give any advice to people out there, if you are burning out with no projected relief in sight, do yourself a favor and know when to cut your losses so you can use your TIM and energy re-strategizing. Story 13. Barely eating anything at all for 1 to 2 years. Now I have skin issues due to up my hormones, stomach and digestion problems, and an unhealthy relationship with food. I also have been having random pains since then and have developed body image issues which I didn't have prior to that. Wouldn't say it's permanent, but it has been over a year and it's physically not getting much better. Also, drugs illicit and psychiatric up my brain chemistry. Story 14. First girlfriend dying. Permanent irreversible damage to my emotional systems lol. I was just a boy. Ain't felt truly happy, content for an extended period of time since. It'll be a decade in January 2025. Story 15. I had a hollow tonsil filled without knowing it. Semi-ruined my life. Over about 8 years, I slowly went from very slight symptoms to constantly getting sick, tonsillitis a bunch of times a year, would catch any cold, my throat and sinuses always feeling messed up. Couldn't even go for a walk without waking up sick the next day. Primary healthcare didn't take me seriously, of course, but eventually they did test me for streptococcus even though I didn't have white bits on my tonsils. It was, of course, positive. Likely had chronic strep infection for years. But not just that, of course. Any bacteria I contracted I couldn't get rid of properly due to them living in the hollow my immune system couldn't reach. I have had to take very strong antibiotics, but unfortunately this was a few months before I, by chance, realized the tonsil was full of, and cleaned it out, and could keep it clean, and sanitize it with antibacterial mouthwash. I wish I or the doctors would have realized that before the antibiotics, because I was of course recolonized. The throat I can keep clean easily, and I've since had the tonsils removed. But the sinuses and nose are still a mess with very probable staphylococcus, likely also with some resistance. So I treat myself as if I'm very infectious to spare others. So much trouble from one tiny little physical flaw. Story 16. Smoking for almost 10 years. Obviously, I knew that smoking was never going to do anything but hurt my lungs. But it's been almost 2 years since I smoked, and I still have terrible lung capacity. Another is not learning healthy exercising habits when I was younger. I wish my parents made me play sports even if I hated it. I think that's another part of why I get so easily winded and fatigued when trying to work out now. It's hard for me to breathe, while also focusing on moving my body the right way. For example, I subconsciously hold my breath when I do planks or when I'm holding a stretch. Edit, thank you for the responses, everyone. I didn't expect this to get many replies at all since I thought I was sort of late to the thread. But I appreciate all of the advice and support. I have been trying for the last year to start doing light cardio workouts. Walking, jogging around outside to try and build my stamina. I live in a pretty rural area though, and there aren't many places to go do that except just in laps around the house. I am trying my best though, because I'd like to be in a lot better shape by spring. Thank you so much. Story 17. Grief. 4 years ago, I lost someone I loved. I went from attractive and fit to overweight and obvious signs of aging. I don't even look like the same person anymore. Like the happy version of me died that day, and this is all that is left. Story 18. Iron deficiency. Iron is so important. Without it, you are not getting enough oxygen to the body, not enough to the brain. I had depression which led to psychosis. So I was treated as simply a depressed patient by doctors. I had memory issues, insomnia, severe fatigue, mood issues, anhedonia, brain fog where I couldn't even use a computer, shortness of breath, etc., etc. I went to the psych ward, did TMS, therapy, all kinds of antidepressants, antipsychotics with horrible side effects. All could probably be avoided had I been told about my iron. No doctor told me, or they told me it's just depression. Can't be iron. Guess what? Low iron can cause depression. Ferritin should be 100 and mine was 10 for who knows how long. I finally feel like I'm healing. Get your iron and ferritin checked, guys. And vitamin D while you're at it. Story 19. I have nerve damage in my hand from cuddling my wife and falling asleep with my arm under her head. It doesn't affect my range of motion at all anymore, but for a while it hurt to move my hand in a certain way. The only lasting effect right now is numbness. No feeling on my hand in between the knuckles of my pointer and middle finger. Story 20. Caffeine. Up until recently, I was ingesting a lot of caffeine daily, and my stomach was constantly a mess. I had food poisoning last week, which was no treat, but I've gone almost 8 days without caffeine and seen a huge change. I probably won't give it up permanently, but it has shifted how much I plan to consume going forward at it. I did the math. On average, I was consuming about 3,000 milliliters of caffeine a week. I'm currently at 0, but will probably land on a cup of coffee a day. Story 21. I know this sounds stupid, but being fat. I recently lost 160 lbs, and I never truly appreciated its effect on my body, from not having to buy shoes as much due to the pressure on my feet, to my body posture, to how tired I would be from walking up a flight of stairs. When you are overweight, You don't fully appreciate that until after you lose the weight, I found. Story 22. Working at night hours alters internal sleeping cycle. If your body gets used it, you gain a passive energy boost at night and the opposite during day hours, even if you have regular sleep patterns. Story 23. I had what I thought was a wart on my neck for the past 3 years. Even put wart medicine on it. Turns out it was skin cancer. Pale people, get yourself checked. Story 24. Probably the way my posture changed from years of sitting hunched over a computer didn't notice until my back started feeling like it was made of bricks. Story 25. Veganism. I went vegan with inadequate preparation to ensure meeting my nutritional needs. In a few years, I started to observe my vitamin D B12 levels drop, and one of the side effects I have not been able to recover from is very poor memory and altered brain function. I am still fine, but my brain is certainly not as sharp as it once was. Story 26. After childbirth. One thing they don't tell you is the nerve endings don't feel the same after possibly damaged, and no matter what I do, I'm not sensitive enough down there to actually reach climax. Exercise. Legit. I exercised for 2 decades, lifting and biking and running slowly, but I ate like and was always very flabby and had a big gut. Then I got my diet in line when I turned 40 and holy. All that work had built a body under there, and suddenly being a lot lighter made me so much faster running and biking. Put in the work. Story 27. Aging crept up on me without me knowing, and then one day I look in the mirror and bam, gray hair on my chin. Month later, I look in the mirror one morning and bam, gray hair on the side of my head. 2 years later, bam, gray hair on my you-know-what. Story 28. Pregnancy, but not in the usual way, because I miscarried at 10 weeks. So no weight gain or belly or anything, but my feet grew a size. Literally was suddenly exactly 1 size larger, none of my shoes fit, and I had to buy all new ones. The definition of heaping insult on injury. Story 29. I was assaulted over the course of 1 to 2 years as a child, and started gaining defensive weight because fat was ugly, and boys wouldn't touch me if I was fat. I became extremely isolated, and intimacy became scary to me. I developed avoidant personality disorder and severe anxiety. I am 33 now, and have never been in an intimate relationship. I expect I never will. My entire life was ruined at age 7 by 2 older boys who probably don't even remember what they did to me. Story 30. Diabetes. Dropped 40 lbs in 3 months before I was diagnosed. Then was diagnosed with neuropathy 5 years later. Have bouts of chronic pain issues with my feet legs. Story 31. Had a broken tooth, kind of subconsciously avoided chewing on that side of my mouth for like a year, and I started getting a sunken temple on the side of my head from jaw muscle atrophy. Story 32. In my early 20s, I wore high heels while working retail. Hours on my feet, which were held in unnatural positions. I also injured a heel jumping off a jetty in Ocean City, MD. Landed right on the sharp edge of a rock. Why, yes, alcohol was involved. I didn't know at the time that having weirdly high arches made me susceptible to plantar fasciitis heel spurs to begin with. Putting all that stress on my feet back then resulted in repeated flare-ups and a painful surgery. I also can't go barefoot ever, and have pretty much constant discomfort. I'll be 60 next year, but already walk like I'm 80. BTW. Having flat feet also puts you at greater risk. High heels. Take care of your feet. Mobility is more important than fashion. Story 33. Raising my twin grandsons with multiple special needs for 4 years. I was, and still am, chronically sleep-deprived and was under immense stress. It led to cognitive impairment, weight gain, complex PTSD with dissociation, and exasperated my ADHD, depression, and anxiety to unimaginable levels. They've been back with their mom for 3 years and they're doing fantastic, as is my daughter. But it's changed me permanently. It'll never be the same again. I'm unable to work because of it. I'm currently under specialist care for the chronic stress and sleep deprivation. Story 34. When my wife had a hemorrhage after the hospital failed to remove all of the placenta during our first son's birth, she was given a bad blood transfusion that introduced the Kell antigen to her blood. We didn't find out until 5 years later when it caused complications in her pregnancy with our second son. The hospital that gave her the blood transfusion never disclosed to us that they made the mistake. Story 35. I punched hard surfaces to develop knuckle resistance to pain and become stronger. Since I was in the 5th grade, I started very light. Fast forward a few months to now, I can hit any wall with nigh full force. It still hurts, but all the pain is now bearable and no bones are broken. So it did work, you may think? Wrong. I cannot apply any amount of force with my wrists in a tangential direction now, or my hand collapses in crippling pain. I can pull and push with my carpals in line with the forearm, but soon as I turn it or apply force in any other direction sideways, It hurts to the point that I can't. Sometimes I can't do push-ups. High five very hard, arm wrestle and sue on. I can work the heavy bag, do pulls-ups and sue on. My wrists are messed up, possibly permanently. And this is after countless adults, including my own martial arts teachers, telling me not to, for years upon years. Please treat your body with respect. If you want to build strength, do it the right way, with resistance and control and little increments in intensity. Do not be as stupid as I was. Story 36. Anorexia. In teenage years weakened my teeth and bones. My dentist was confused when I showed up one day, and my teeth were in much worse condition. Also not sure if this is related, but any little bump like running into a wall makes me feel like I'm about to break a bone. Story 37. Antidepressants. I was unaware that it could give me weight. It's just as difficult to relieve depression because you even have to bear with its side effects. Story 38. Desk job. My C-section. It was an emergency. My baby was losing oxygen, and I was exhausted after 76 hours, literally 3 days, of a very slow labor. Boy, oh boy, I had no idea that surgery would change my life so much. My body wasn't fully healed when I got pregnant again 5 months postpartum. That second pregnancy was brutal with abdominal and back pain. It was so bad I needed physical therapy to keep me mobile and was on bed rest the last 3 weeks of pregnancy. About a year later, I started getting horrible back and abdominal pains. It would take 2 exploratory surgeries and 3 years later for me to get answers. In those 3 years, I had to speak with multiple specialists and start pain management, and had to use a walking cane to help me stay functional. I finally found a urogynecologist who would give me answers. I have stage 2 endometriosis and PCOS. My bladder was adhered to my C-section scar and abdominal wall. I had a bladder sling implanted and 5 lbs of scar tissue and adhesions excised from my body. It's been 2 years since the implant and adhesions removal surgery, and my health is so much better now. I still need at-home physical therapy to keep me mobile, but I no longer need a cane to help me walk upright. The worst pains I feel now are when I'm on my period with cramps and bloating. Changing my diet to pescatarian and practicing Qigong helped me a lot with my recovery. For the rest of my life, I'm going to be plagued by chronic pains, a bladder sling implant that will have to be replaced every 15-20 years, and a weaker immune system, but am healthy, functional, and alive. Story 39. Working in rotational molding plastics manufacturing. While working in this job, I saw one guy come in his first day. Perfectly healthy skin. 1 week later, he comes out to have a smoke with me, and his skin is blistered from head to toe. He said it started almost day 1 of working there. The next time I saw him, they were open wounds. I have 2 scars on my body. They were essentially 2 permanent pimples, one on either arm, both within 6 inches of my elbows. Both finally healed when I left that job, but both left permanent scarring. I have no doubt that if someone took a sample of the skin from that area of my body, they would find embedded plastic. What's super scary is that in these plants, they don't make you wear a mask. Even though you could literally watch the fumes of plastic turn back into little spiderwebs of plastic as they cooled down. When parts came off the machine, you were supposed to put vent lines in it that would remove the fumes. Most of these vent lines were plugged and literally did nothing. Meanwhile, some of the machine operators would scold you for not using them. It depends on which machine you worked. The machines I regularly worked produces parts that were made from 55 pounds up to 500 pounds. Fuel tanks for large industrial equipment. On these machines, the vent lines were the same size as the machines that were producing parts from 125 pounds. So obviously our vent lines were just about worthless. Depending on what type of plastic you were working with, the fumes could just about knock you on your if you accidentally coughed a big whiff. Besides that, there was one machine in the whole plant that literally everyone seemed to be intimidated by, and it was one of the smallest machines in the plant. But when you walked by it, it just looked and smelled like I. And that was the liquid nylon machine. I don't want to know the issues that guys in liquid nylon have to deal with because even from 100 feet away, the smell was awful. Story 40. UTI. Had a really bad one when I was younger and I was living with a terrible Baptist family foster care. They were extremely abusive, both mentally, and I told them I was hurting. Maybe I need to see a gyno, but they told me there was no reason for me to see one since I wasn't active. I never went to the detour, so the UTI kept coming back. Because of the parental abuse and no explanation, I just figured that's how my body was. I have a lot of issues now from this. After countless UTIs and no explanations I developed bladder and kidney infections that landed me in the hospital, and I now have pelvic inflammatory disease and interstitial cystitis. Story 41. Lyme disease. Had it twice when I was 11 and 13. I ended up being diagnosed with arthritis, which was later revised to a bunch of other things, but basically it turned into a lifetime of chronic illness. No one is really 100% sure what happened, But my personal theory has always been that having Lyme twice at such young ages sum up in my body that led to the major health issues I deal with today. And we had no idea back when I was a kid. How could we have? We thought these things were totally unrelated. My doctors think there's some weight to this theory, but there's no way to know for sure. Lyme disease, man. Not even once. Story 42. The dentist. I went to a really cheap dentist who totally messed up a bunch of other things, but I didn't realize until a few months later when someone pointed it out that he had filed down the pointed part of my front canine teeth without asking. Turns out he has a lot of complaints from specifically women for doing this. Grief. Story 43. The foam insert of a plastic hair curler. Gather around and it'll spin you a yarn of childhood foolishness. Back in the early 90s when I was 3 to 4-ish, I had the dumb habit of putting things into my head. Mouth, nose, ears, all were potential pockets. On one of these ill-fated occasions, I nabbed one of my mother's curlers and thought, can I fit that squishy bit in my nose? Well, I was right. Fit so well, so far in my nasal cavity that I couldn't retrieve it. Being a parental retribution-fearing kid, my prime directive became don't tell. You'll get in trouble. I foolishly didn't for quite some time until my mother noticed a weird smell when she'd give the old cheek kiss as she sent me off to preschool. After a brief interrogation and a trip to the pediatrician, it was extracted. Needless to say, it wasn't the same as it went in. I wasn't either, though I didn't find out until my teens that my sense of smell and taste were diminished a bit. I also spent an eternity in congestion as well. It was only when I began my oral skills class in college did I realize my hearing took a hit as well. Gonna try and make sure our son isn't afraid to talk to us when he knows he's screwed up. Story 44. Magic mushrooms killed my lifelong depression for a week or so, but the lasting effect has been an acute awareness of the world. Like everything I believed has shifted. Hard to explain. Story 45. I ran a somewhat long distance without any preparation and in bad shoes. Everything felt fine during the run. Afterwards, my knees hurt like having knee issue ever since. Story 46. Taking ibuprofen for chronic headaches, drinking too much coffee, smoking cigarettes quit like 8 years ago. Now I've got GERD and occasional stomach ulcers. Story 47. Being pregnant. There are the obvious things you expect: stretch marks, weight gain, hormone shifts, etc. What I didn't plan for was severe indigestion that lasted for months. I assumed it was normal because when you're pregnant and you speak to your doctor about stuff, the response is always, yeah, that's normal. So I just munched on Tums constantly and went about my day. I went to the hospital multiple times for really bad chest and upper back pain and was told I was just having panic attacks because my EKG was normal and the baby was fine. I didn't think it was heartburn that was sending me to the hospital because it was like a serious pain that made me feel like I was dying, and no amount of Tums or Tylenol was making it go away. Third time going to the ER, we went to a different hospital. It was the worst flare-up it had and I couldn't stop puking. My partner had to wheel me into the hospital. She thought I was dying in the car. Turns out I needed emergency gallbladder surgery at 34 weeks pregnant. The indigestion I was dealing with was not normal. I was not having panic attacks. And my gallbladder was so inflamed and full of stones if it had been left alone just a little longer it would have killed my pancreas too. After it was over, I had multiple friends and coworkers share similar stories. None had to have the surgery while pregnant, but quite a few experienced gallstones or had to have theirs removed shortly after giving birth. There seriously needs to be more info on what could happen to your body while being pregnant because losing an organ was not on my bingo card. Story 48. Horseback riding. Turns out it permanently alters the shape of your hips and lower spine if you ride as a child. Enough that archaeologists can see it in skeletons. Story 49. Antibiotic stains on my teeth. I am allergic to penicillin and was sick a lot as a kid. It was the 60s and no one realized that it was bad for a kid to live with chain-smoking adults. Story 50. When I was 16, I got hit in the stomach during cheer. I had an X-ray at the time. Everything seemed fine, just was bruised sore. Enter GI and digestive issues. Over the next 15 years, they worsened and worsened. I was eventually diagnosed with a vascular compression in my abdomen. While I do not 100% know if that hit caused the compression, it's very likely as abdominal trauma can cause it, and that is the same time frame my symptoms started. Story 51. I can lose weight insanely fast. That's not normal later. Oops, I don't even have the energy to get up. Now I give myself food every day, even if I didn't do anything to deserve it. Story 52. Getting my gallbladder removed when they kept insisting I had stones destroyed my health. I had my gallbladder removed over Thanksgiving break 2015. I was a teacher before all this started, and I have had high-volume diarrhea and vomiting since then. I am now almost 75 lbs lighter than I was when I had surgery, through no dieting. I now have a portacath in my chest and have to have infusion 5 days a week. I need them 7 days a week. But infusion places are only open M, permanently disabled. I almost lost my home. I had to pry my 401k to survive during the 4 years I fought disability, etc. Story 53. Sugar. I've had some skin issues since puberty and was overweight for most of my life. At times, my skin would get worse for months on end, and I couldn't understand why. Now I know that eating more sugar will make it worse. Acne on my shoulders, face, random itchiness, sometimes even big coin-sized red spots that itch a lot. So now that I try to limit my sugar consumption, my skin mostly cleared up. Story 54. Eating like and staying overweight led to insulin resistance, which led to prediabetes, which led to full-blown diabetes. Didn't realize any of this until I was already pre-diabetic. I've been like this so long that the damage to my pancreas is irreversible. And even now that I've lost weight, my blood sugar levels will never go down as much as they would have if I'd addressed this years ago. Story 55. Radiation therapy. Worked fine when I was going through treatments and helped kill my cancer, but a few years down the line it destroyed my hips, my shoulders, my back, my stomach, and my lungs. At least I'm not dead though, so there's that. Story 56. The Rona. Since I had corona, I have very often an illness in my upper respiratory system. I am from Germany and work in kindergarten, and the children have also very often typical a cold or such things, but my immune system has really taken a beating since COVID. I have very often a cold, bronchitis, and other things. Or, I am getting old with 40. Story 57. Our mothers teaching us to in our stomach at all times, especially if around people. I have permanent muscle disfigurement and a set of second that will never go away. Story 58. A off-extended family member squeezed my hand brutally while shaking it several years ago. The more time passes, the more I can see I received a permanent injury from his bullshit. Story 59. Drinking problem. Gained a lot of weight, and my face was swollen and red. Didn't even realize how bad it was. Now, 5 years sober, and I look like a completely different person. I get compliments all the time on how young I look. Story 60. Contact sports. Had a few bigger injuries back in the day, but I mostly came through that time unscathed. 25-30 years later, all of the joints are screaming, neck is compressed, a little nerve damage here and there. Worth it. Story 61. You know those husband pillows that are shaped like the back and arms of an armchair? I used one as a regular pillow for my entire freshman year of college. Felt great. I could breathe really well. But I was sleeping in a permanent shrugging position with my arms out to my sides. It's been 10 years, and I still can't lift my right arm fully above my head. The pain is bearable now, but nothing helps but time. Story 62. A huge picture window I used to work beside. In my old office, there was a great view of a canyon, and my office had almost floor-to-ceiling windows. I had my desk situated at an angle so I could see out, which put one side of my face toward the light for hours a day for several years. I know sunlight can age the skin, but I thought only direct sunlight did that. Like if you're laying out. I never got direct sunlight given the direction it faced, and the window was tinted. After a few years, I was washing my face one night after a long day at work and realized the water felt different temperatures on the two sides of my face. I thought it was weird but didn't make the connection. It took a while longer before I realized the skin on the side of my face that faced the light is noticeably more aged than the other side. I can mostly see it around my eyes, like the eyelid, but in other ways too. So be careful about prolonged exposure to sunlight. Even if it's indirect, it will definitely age your skin. Story 63. I didn't sleep properly as a teen, possibly because of hormonal issues that would show up later. Undiagnosed neurodivergence or the shift I distinctly remember happening when my bedside lamp went from an old-fashioned orange bulb to a bright IKEA LED. I'm significantly shorter than the rest of my family, and they've told me it's put me at a huge disadvantage. Story 64. Antibiotics. I was put on a 10-day round of penicillin for a tooth infection. I didn't need to be on the antibiotics that long, and it messed up my gut so badly I can no longer eat gluten. I'm gluten intolerant. It also made one of my medications stop working, but that's another story. It took me 9 months to figure it out. For 9 months, I was in severe pain every day and bloated like crazy. I didn't figure it out until I got sick for a week and couldn't eat anything other than broth. My bloat went away during that week. Once I was feeling better, I ate a breakfast sandwich. Bloat immediately came back. Severe pain, the works. So I didn't eat anything with gluten again for another couple weeks. Ate a slice of bread and bloated up again. Cut out gluten and I've been much better. Now I'll throw up if I accidentally consume gluten, and this will never go away. All because of antibiotics. I miss Cheez-Its. Story 65. Sulfa. My junior year of high school, I got a UTI, and a doctor prescribed an antibiotic containing sulfa. What followed was a horrific stomachache, and me discovering I was allergic to the drug. A few months later, I started to notice problems with my GI tract, and a few months after that, blood started to appear in my stool. My healthcare was a referral-only system, and the general doctor, despite hearing about my pain and blood, kept just asking for blood and stool samples and saying they couldn't find anything wrong. My freshman year of college, my mother demands I be referred to a specialist, which I didn't know was a thing at this point in my life. After a 5-minute call with a gastroenterologist, he says I probably have ulcerative colitis based on my symptoms, and I need a colonoscopy immediately. The antibiotic ravaged my gut bacteria, and I developed an autoimmune disease in response. It has no cure, only expensive maintenance drugs. I will spend the rest of my life at the beck and call of my condition, and will be paying thousands of dollars a year to avoid relapsing to more difficult symptoms. I have a heightened chance of developing colon cancer, and now that I'm in my 30s and have been diagnosed longer than 12 years, I will need to do colonoscopies every few years just to check I don't develop cancer or other serious complications. Story 66. COVID. Took me a few months and a lot of trial and error to realize that the reason my ADHD meds, which I was fine with before, were suddenly giving me intolerable dry mouth, was because COVID gave me permanent dry mouth normally. Stacking stimulant side effects on was just bumping it from annoying to unbearable. Few years later, I've still got it. Sucks. Story 67. Terrible sleep apnea that went undiagnosed for a decade. Once I got my CPAP machine, I stopped getting up every 3 hours to pee, and my acid reflux went away immediately. Not to mention I felt rested and cognizant. I joke that I must have been in a fugue state for that whole decade. Story 68. Severe trauma. I thought I was crazy and then got some help. I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and learned that trauma is not a cognitive thing. Your body literally rewires itself so it can protect you. Unfortunately, it is not helpful to how you react to life in the future. Story 69. 21 years ago, I was hit by a bus. Like a literal bus while riding my bike. Totally my fault. I was thrown 10 feet and landed on my head. No helmet. Looking back, I probably had a brain injury that took a few years to recover from. I also separated my shoulder. In the last year and a half, I lost about 60 lbs, and I'm at an adult low weight now. The other day, I realized that now that my collarbone and shoulders are less fleshy, my shoulders are totally uneven. The injured one rolls forward. Bus. Using the wrong skincare products caused permanent skin damage that took years to notice.